The restaurant was all gold and shadows, the kind of place where men who owned cities came to make decisions that would echo through the underworld for years. I didn't belong here. I had never belonged anywhere near this world, and yet here I was, sitting across from Dante Moretti, a man whose name made security guards check twice before letting him pass. My hand trembled as I raised the wine glass to my lips. The silk of my emerald dress felt too tight against my swollen belly, the belly that I'd been hiding under oversized sweaters for months. Tonight, I couldn't hide it. Dante had chosen this restaurant, had seated me directly under the chandelier's crystal light, and I knew why. It was a message. "Look at her," the placement said. "She's mine now." The irony made me want to laugh bitterly. I wasn't Dante's. I'd come to dinner because he'd threatened to come to my apartment, to my small, vulnerable life, and I'd been raised to never let dangerous men into my private spaces. Better to meet them in public. Better to control what I could control, which was almost nothing. "You're beautiful tonight, Alessandra," Dante said, his voice smooth as caramel and twice as poisonous. He was handsome in a way that made my skin crawl. Perfect symmetry, perfect teeth, perfect lie. "Pregnancy suits you." I forced a smile. "I'm not pregnant." The words were automatic, desperate, useless. He knew. Everyone who needed to know already knew. Of course not. He reached across the table, and I let him take my hand because refusing would have been worse. His thumb traced circles on my palm. And I thought about how different hands could feel, how one man's touch could feel like drowning, and another's could feel like... The thought shattered before I could finish it. "You should have told me about the baby," Dante continued, his eyes never leaving my face. "We could have celebrated privately. Instead, I had to hear it from..." The door opened. I didn't look up. I didn't have to. Every nerve in my body went rigid, responding to something I couldn't name. The ambient noise of the restaurant shifted. Silverware paused mid-air. The maitre d' stood straighter, almost at attention. My heart recognized him before my brain did. When I finally turned my head, I saw him. Viktor Kozlov stood in the doorway with a woman on his arm, sleek, blonde, the kind of woman who belonged in a restaurant like this. His mistress, probably. His current acquisition. He wore a charcoal suit that must have cost more than my entire monthly rent, and the casual way he moved through the space made it clear that he owned not just the room, but the air in it. He'd aged 3 months. That was impossible, and yet it was true. New lines around his eyes, his jaw harder, his shoulders carrying weight that hadn't been there when he'd left me without explanation, without apology, without anything but a text message that said, "It's over." Then he saw me. The entire restaurant felt it, that freeze, that crystallization of power and shock in a single moment. The blonde woman on his arm looked up at him, confused, but Viktor wasn't looking at her. His ice-blue eyes had locked onto mine across the sea of white tablecloths and crystal glasses, and I watched something change in his face. Watched, and felt it like a blade. His mistress tightened her grip on his arm, following his gaze. She saw me, pregnant, glowing under the chandelier light, sitting across from Dante Moretti with my hand still in his. She saw, and I watched her pale. Dante squeezed my hand. A promise. A threat. "Don't move." But Viktor was already moving. He dismissed the blonde woman with a single word I couldn't hear, and she peeled away from him like she'd been burned. He walked toward our table with the kind of calm that preceded violence, the kind that made security guards die before they could reach for their weapons. "Dante." His voice was gravel in winter. "I didn't know you were in the city." Dante smiled, and his smile was the smile of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. Just arrived. Thought I'd take some old friends to dinner. Victor's eyes found mine again. In them, I saw every moment we'd ever been together. His apartment, his hands, his voice telling me things in the dark that I wasn't supposed to believe. And I saw something else too. Something raw and furious and desperate, hidden behind ice. He saw the belly. He understood. Alessandra, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a prayer and a curse combined. You look different. She's glowing, Dante said, pulling my hand closer to him. Must be the pregnancy. She's been hiding it, but I think the secret's out now. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and frantic. I could feel Victor calculating, feel him running through the months, the timeline, the night he'd walked away. I could see the moment he realized that the baby inside me belonged to him. Belonged. That word had never been accurate. Congratulations, Victor said, and his voice was so cold that frost seemed to crystallize on the tablecloth. On the pregnancy and the companionship. He turned to leave, the blonde woman waiting by the door, looking confused and furious. But he paused. Just for a second, he paused, and I watched his hand curl into a fist. Take care of her, Dante, he said. She's fragile, breakable, easily frightened. I wouldn't want anything to happen to her before the baby comes. It was the worst thing he could have said, not because of the words, but because of what lay beneath them, that he cared, that he was claiming, even as he was leaving, that he was warning, because warning was all he could do if he'd already walked away from us. Then he was gone, and the restaurant inhaled again. The world tilted back into focus, and I realized I was shaking so hard that Dante had to set down my hand before someone noticed. Well, he said, cutting into his steak with methodical precision. Wasn't that interesting? I didn't answer. I was staring at the door where Victor had disappeared, and I was understanding for the first time that the city I thought I could survive in was about to be consumed by fire. And I had just struck the match. Dante didn't take me home that night. Instead, he drove me to a penthouse in the financial district, all glass and steel, and the kind of view that made you feel like you were floating above the world instead of living in it. You'll stay here, he said, not as an invitation. He guided me by the small of my back, and I hated how careful he was being, how aware of the baby. It made me feel colonized. Until I've decided what to do about our situation, I wanted to ask what situation he meant. Me, the baby, or Victor's dramatic reappearance in a life Dante had been so methodically building a narrative around. But I'd learned, in the 3 months since Victor left, that asking questions was dangerous. Asking implied you had agency, implied you could refuse. The apartment was beautiful in a way that felt sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city at night. Furniture that probably came from some exclusive designer. A kitchen with expensive appliances that no one used. And a bedroom, a massive bedroom, where Dante showed me to a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size. For you, he said. I've been planning this, planning us. The words made my skin crawl. I stayed in the bathroom for an hour, just breathing. My hands shaking over the sink. The baby kicked, a strange flutter that felt like a question mark against my ribs, and I pressed my palm against my belly like I could communicate back. It's okay. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. I'd just announced my pregnancy to the man it belonged to while being claimed by the man who wanted to use it as leverage. Around 2 a.m., I heard voices from the other room. Dante, and someone else. I pressed my ear against the door and tried to listen. Can't move on her directly, a man was saying. Kozlov's already making calls. The Lukian family is mobilizing. If we touch her, she's leverage. Dante cut him off, and his voice was different now. Colder. The voice underneath the charm. Not a person, a piece. And pieces move when I tell them to move. I pulled away from the door, feeling sick. The next morning I woke to the doorbell ringing. Dante had already left. A note on the kitchen counter said he had business, would return by evening, and I was not to leave the apartment. Not a request. A rule. I was standing at the window, trying to summon the energy to feel trapped, when I saw the car pull up below. A black Range Rover, so dark it seemed to absorb light. And when the door opened, I knew before I saw him. The city itself seemed to recognize him. People on the street instinctively moved out of his way. Victor. He stepped out of the car with a phone to his ear, saying something in rapid Russian that made even the casual pedestrians look nervous. He was dressed in a simple black shirt and tailored pants, and somehow that made him more dangerous than the suit from last night, like he'd removed the pretense of civilization entirely. My breath came shallow. He was here. Not for Dante. They would handle each other through intermediaries and threats delivered in polite restaurant conversations. He was here because of me. For a moment I considered hiding, turning off the lights, pretending the apartment was empty. But Viktor Kozlov didn't operate on courtesy or assumptions. If he wanted to get in, he would get in. The elevator chimed. He'd been given access. I moved away from the window and stood in the center of the living room, trying to make myself look less pregnant, which was ridiculous and impossible. My dress hung oddly over my belly. I should have changed into something that fit better, something that didn't look like a confession. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. Victor stepped out and stopped, his eyes finding me across the empty space like a hunter finding prey. Except his hands were shaking. I could see it from across the room, the tremor in his fingers as he closed the apartment door behind him. "Hello, Alessandra," he said, and his voice had lost the ice from last night. Now it was just raw, unguarded. "I was wondering how long you were going to keep running." "I'm not running," I said quietly. "I'm standing right here." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Yes, here, in Dante Moretti's penthouse, wearing clothes he bought, pregnant with my child that you didn't tell me about." "You left." The words escaped before I could stop them. "You sent me a text message, Victor. A text message. What did you expect me to do? Wait? Hope? I got on with my life." "Got on with your life." He took a step closer. "With my rival. You realize that Dante is planning to use you to get to me, yes? That you and that baby are pieces on his board, not people? And you're not?" The accusation hung in the air between us. "You're not here using me? You're not here calculating how this helps you? How this hurts him?" He stopped walking. His jaw clenched. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "You're right," he said. "I don't know why I came. I should let him have you. It would be cleaner. It would be easier." The words felt like knives. Cleaner. Easier. As if I were something that could be divided into categories of convenience. I turned away from him because I couldn't bear to look at his face and feel what I was feeling. The pull, the gravity, the terrible need to move closer to him, despite every rational thought screaming that he was danger. "I need you to leave," I said. "Alexandra, I need you to leave." My voice broke on the second word, and I hated myself for it. I hated how much power he still had over me. How 3 months of abandonment, 3 months of aloneness, hadn't been enough to kill what I felt when he was in the same room. I heard him move. heard his footsteps cross the distance between us. And then his hands were on my shoulders, so gentle, so careful, holding me like I was made of glass. "The baby," he said, and the words sounded torn from somewhere deep inside him. "Is it mine?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I said yes, I was claiming him. If I said yes, I was asking him to stay, to fight Dante, to pull me into a war that had already started. His forehead dropped to rest against my hair. "Don't answer," he whispered. "I already know. I've always known. I saw you in that restaurant, and I knew. I felt it." His hands moved to my belly, tentative, reverent, the touch of a man encountering something he'd never expected to want. The baby kicked, right against his palm. Victor made a sound, a choked, broken thing, and I felt him tremble. "Get out," someone said from the doorway. Both of us turned. Dante stood in the entrance, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. His eyes were cold, cold in a way that meant he was done playing. "Now," Dante said, "or I start taking pieces." Victor's hand didn't leave my belly. He looked at Dante with something like pity. "She's staying with me," Victor said calmly. "You can try to stop me. But understand, Dante, the moment your finger touches the trigger, you've declared war on the Kozlov family, and you'll lose. Get out." Victor pulled back slowly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw every threat he was about to make real. "Pack a bag," he said. 10 minutes, whatever you can carry." "She's not going anywhere," Dante said. "No," I said, and my voice sounded like someone else's. "No, I'm not. I'm staying." It was the wrong choice. I knew it was the wrong choice, but it was mine. Victor's expression shattered. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment. Hurt. The kind of look a man gives when he realizes that someone he loves has betrayed him. "Then I'll be waiting," he said. "In the city, across the street, in the walls. Every breath you take, I'll be there. And when you're ready, when you realize what he is, I'll be waiting." He walked toward the door. Dante moved aside, letting him pass. And as Victor disappeared into the elevator, I felt the first real stab of fear. Not of Dante. Of what would happen when the man I'd just rejected finally understood that I wasn't his to protect. I was his to claim. The next week passed in a strange kind of imprisonment. Not the bars and locked doors kind, but the kind where the cage is invisible and the bars are made of other people's choices. Dante was kind. That was the worst part. He brought me flowers. He had a prenatal doctor come to the apartment. He touched my belly when I let him, his hand lingering just long enough to be possessive, and talked about the baby in ways that felt like he was rehearsing a role. "My son, our family, the future we'll build." But I heard the other conversations, men coming and going, the phone calls taken in the study, the way certain names made Dante's jaw tighten. Kozlov, the Kozlov family, the old man's moving assets to the east side. We need to know why. It became clear, in those days, that Dante had been planning something long before I became convenient as leverage. Victor's empire was cracking from the inside, and Dante intended to exploit every fracture. I was just a tool. A particularly useful one, because now Victor would be emotionally compromised. On the 8th day, I tried to leave. I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days, and headed for the elevator. I made it as far as the stairwell before I realized there was a guard at the exit. "Mr. Moretti's instructions," he said politely. "No one leaves without his approval." I went back to the apartment and looked out the window. The street below was quiet, orderly, no sign of the black Range Rover. But Victor had said he'd be waiting. I pressed my hand against the glass and wondered if he was out there watching, if he could see me, if he even cared anymore. That night, Dante came home early. He'd brought wine, expensive wine from some private collection, and he wanted to talk. "I've been thinking," he said, pouring 2 glasses that I wouldn't drink from, "about the baby, about what we should name him." "It might be a girl," I said quietly. "No, it's a boy. I can feel it." He handed me a glass. I set it on the table untouched. "What do you think about Marco or Salvatore?" Inherited names, names of men who'd probably died doing this work. Names that would come with expectations and violence and all the things that came with being born into a crime family. "I haven't decided," I said. Dante's expression shifted. Something darker leaked through the careful charm. "You haven't decided," he repeated, "as if you have a choice. I'm the mother. The choice is mine." He set down his wineglass with deliberate care. When he looked at me again, I saw why people feared him. It had nothing to do with the gun or the guards. It was the way his entire personality could recalibrate in an instant, shifting from kindness to something medieval and cruel. "You understand what you are, yes?" he said. "You're not my equal. You're not my partner. You're the woman carrying a child that will give me leverage over Viktor Kozlov. That's all you've ever been. That's all you'll ever be." The words didn't hurt, not the way they might have before, because I'd already suspected them. I'd always known them, somewhere deep in the part of me that was still rational. What hurt was knowing that Victor had understood this, had seen it from the moment I chose to stay. "I want to leave," I said. "No. I'm asking. Asking means nothing." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "You're going to stay here until the baby comes. You're going to give birth to my heir, and then you're going to raise him to understand what his grandfather bought with the Kozlov bloodline." I stood up slowly. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, a protective gesture that felt both futile and essential. "You can't keep me here forever. Can't I?" Dante turned to face me, and his smile was sad, almost apologetic. "Alessandra, I can keep you here for as long as I want. I can keep you here until the sun doesn't rise. I can make you believe that there's nothing beyond these walls except death." He walked closer. Gently, so gently, he reached out and cupped my face in his hand. "The only person who could have taken you from me already tried," he said. "And you chose to stay. You chose to reject him. So now he's alone, watching from the shadows, knowing that you're mine, and that he can't touch you without starting a war he'll lose." My eyes filled with tears. I hated him for it. Hated that he understood human weakness so well. "The difference between me and Kozlov," Dante continued, "is that I understand you. He wanted to protect you by controlling you. I control you because that's what keeps you alive. There's a kindness in it, if you look deeply enough." He lowered his hand and walked away, leaving me standing alone by the window. I looked out at the street and tried to see the Range Rover, tried to feel Victor's presence the way he'd promised. But the city was just a city, full of millions of lives, and none of them looking at the penthouse where I was slowly being erased. That's when the power cut out. The apartment went dark. All of it. The lights, the climate control, the electronic locks on the doors. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the alarms started screaming. I heard shouts from the hallway. Gunfire, muffled but distinctive, and men running. Dante burst out of his study, weapon drawn, barking orders into his phone. The guards were scrambling to defend positions that were being attacked from the inside. "Stay in the bedroom," Dante commanded, pushing me toward the back of the apartment. But I stood rooted, watching the chaos unfold. The penthouse door burst open. Black-clad men poured in, faceless, efficient, moving like a tide. They weren't police. They weren't rival gangsters with territory to claim. They were something more organized, more lethal. And at the center of them, walking through the violence like it was raining and he had an umbrella, was Victor. He was different. This wasn't the broken man from the restaurant or the confused intruder from the apartment. This was the man Dante had been fighting against, the old Kozlov, the Mafia boss who ruled territories and bent families to his will. He moved with absolute control, his eyes scanning, calculating, finding Dante in the chaos like a compass needle finding north. "You were stupid," Victor said, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "Using her as leverage against me. That was stupid, Dante." Dante raised his weapon. Victor's hand moved, fast, too fast to follow, and the gun was in the air, clattering across the floor. Dante staggered back, cradling his broken wrist. "She's nothing to me now," Dante spat. "I've already moved, already won. That baby is marked." Victor drove his fist into Dante's face with the kind of force that made the entire apartment shudder. Dante dropped, and Victor stood over him, breathing hard, looking like he was considering whether or not to continue. Then he looked at me. Our eyes met across the ruined room, and I saw something break open in his expression. All the control, all the authority, cracked. "Come," he said, and it wasn't an order. It was a plea. I moved toward him. I don't remember crossing the space, but suddenly he was there, pulling me against him with desperation that surprised me. "I'm sorry," he said into my hair. "I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I couldn't—" "Why did you come?" I asked. His hand moved to my belly, and the tenderness in the gesture made me understand, finally, that this man had never wanted to control me for power. He'd wanted to keep me close because keeping me close was the only thing that made him believe he could be more than what he was. "Because you were here," he said. "Because nothing else mattered." The Kozlov estate was hidden in the old part of the city, surrounded by high walls and older money. It wasn't a mansion in the traditional sense. It was too sprawling, too utilitarian, designed by someone who'd learned that beauty was a luxury that could get you killed. Victor's grandfather lived here. That was the first thing I understood when we arrived, moving through midnight streets in the back of a black car while the city burned behind us. "Don't be afraid," Victor said, his hand never leaving mine. "My grandfather will not hurt you." But his hand was shaking. That was what I focused on. Not the danger or the uncertainty, but the fact that the man beside me was terrified. Of his own family. Of what came next. An older man met us in the entrance hall. Konstantin Kozlov looked like Victor might look in 30 years. The same ice-blue eyes, the same way of standing like the ground itself was bowing under his weight. Behind him were men with guns, and older women with a face of polished stone, and younger men with identical expressions of cold appraisal. "The girl," the old man said, examining me like I was a piece of furniture he was considering purchasing. "And she's pregnant." "She's Victor's," one of the younger men said, and I heard the implications beneath the words: property, claim, ownership. "Is she?" Konstantin said, and something in his tone made the room go very still. Victor took a step forward, protective, territorial. "She's mine," he said. "The baby is mine, and she's not part of this." No one is outside of this, Constantine replied. She's inside now, which means she's leverage, which means every decision she makes affects every other decision we make. I won't let you use her. You won't let me? The old man smiled, and it was like watching a shark discover that someone had just dropped a swimmer into the water. Victor, you're the one who brought her into my home. You're the one who'd rather expose the entire family to Dante's machinations than leave her to be handled correctly. I won't let you hurt her. Of course you won't, Constantine said. You're in love with her, which is a weakness, but also a useful tool. He turned and walked back into the house, expecting us to follow. Victor squeezed my hand and pulled me forward. The interior of the estate was all dark wood and portrait oil paintings of men who looked like they'd committed worse crimes than any of the ones whispered about in the streets. Servants moved silently. Doors opened and closed with military precision. And everywhere, in corners, on roof lines, in the shadows, there were guns. I was given a room upstairs. It was beautiful in the way of very expensive prisons. A bed with silk sheets, a bathroom with heated marble, windows that opened onto grounds surrounded by reinforced walls. Victor came to me that night after everyone had gone to sleep. He moved through the darkness like he'd walked these halls his entire life, which he probably had. I'm sorry, he said again. The words seemed to be all he had left. Stop apologizing. I sat up in the bed, the silk sliding across my skin. Tell me what's happening. He sat on the edge of the mattress, not touching me, maintaining distance like it could prevent the inevitable. Dante was moving money through laundering operations in the eastern districts, Victor said. My grandfather's operations. The old man didn't know. By the time we realized, Dante had already started consolidating power among the smaller families. He was going to make a move. On your family? On everything. He was going to use you as insurance. If he had you, he had leverage over me. If he had leverage over me, he could negotiate from a position of strength. And now? Now you're here. Which means I've proven to my grandfather that I'm capable of being thoughtless, reckless, and willing to jeopardize operations for personal gain. Which means he's going to put me under scrutiny. Which means he's going to test you, I finished. Victor looked at me. In the darkness, his eyes were unreadable. Yes. The door to my room had no lock. I realized this the next morning when Constantine's wife, Victor's grandmother, entered without knocking. She was a small woman with steel-colored hair and the kind of posture that suggested she'd spent decades teaching men how to behave. Walk with me, she said. Not asked. We moved through the estate, and I became hyper-aware of how far from help I actually was. No phone, no way to contact the outside world. Just an older woman who owned territories and had probably made people disappear with a single word. You're wondering why I brought you out here, she said, as we walked through greenhouse gardens that seemed impossibly lush for the season. Yes. Because curiosity is good. It means you're not stupid. Stupid women cause problems. She paused to examine a rose, running her finger along its petals with disturbing tenderness. My grandson loves you. That makes you dangerous. I don't want to be dangerous. No one does, but we all are to someone. She looked at me. Tell me, when you were with Victor before, when he left you, did you hate him? The question caught me off guard. I tried to. I couldn't. Because you loved him more than you wanted to survive without him. She resumed walking. That's what I need to know. Can you survive without him? If circumstances require it? If his survival depends on you releasing your grip on his heart? I don't know, I said truthfully. Then we have a problem. She turned to face me, and her eyes were kind in a way that was somehow more terrifying than cruelty. Because the only way he survives what's coming is if he can function without distractions. And you, my dear, are the most dangerous distraction he's ever had. That night, Victor tried to touch me. We were in the library, hidden behind closed doors, and he reached for my hand like he was testing whether I was real. I pulled away. His entire body went rigid. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Your grandmother." He understood immediately. His jaw clenched. "She doesn't make my choices. But she influences them. And if being with me is going to hurt you, if it's going to make you vulnerable in a way that gets you killed..." I stopped, unable to finish the thought. "Then you choose for me? You push me away to keep me safe?" "Yes." He stared at me like I'd just told him I was leaving forever. And maybe I was. Maybe this was the moment where love became a luxury and survival became the only currency that mattered. "Don't," he said. "Don't make decisions for me, Alessandra. Not ever. That's what everyone else is trying to do. Control me, move me, use me. If you do it too, if I don't, you might die." He reached out and pulled me against him, and I felt the tremor in his hands. "Then we'll both die, but not like this. Not separated, not in agony." He held me, and I felt the weight of the choice settle over me. To love him was to accept that loving him meant pain. That the baby I was carrying would be born into a world of violence and conspiracy and threats. That there was no safety here, no escape, no clean ending. But there was him. And in that moment, terrified and trapped in a fortress of older men and older money, that seemed like enough. It seemed like everything. 3 weeks passed like frames in a film reel, each day bleeding into the next with mounting pressure and electrical silence. Victor was moved into my room. Not by his choice, it was his grandfather's decision. Constantine wanted to observe the relationship, which meant he wanted to watch whether Victor could be distracted by personal attachment. Whether love was a weakness that could be exploited. We maintained separate beds. Victor had insisted on that, and I was grateful for it, because I didn't know how to be that close to him without falling apart completely. Instead, we learned how to exist in the same space without touching. It was its own kind of intimacy. Worse, maybe, because proximity without contact created a hunger that was almost unbearable. He would read in the chair by the window. I would lie in bed, pretending to sleep, aware of every shift in his posture, every page he turned. When he moved to shower, I would listen to the water running behind the bathroom door and feel something twist inside my chest. When I cried, which I did often now, the pregnancy hormones and fear combining into a chemical storm, he would sit on the edge of the bed and not touch me. His hands would curl into fists at his sides, and he'd whisper, I know, I'm here." But he wasn't. Not in the way I needed. On the 21st day, during one of the rare moments we had alone, he tried to talk about it. "My grandfather wants to see if I can be controlled through you," Victor said flatly. "If your safety is threatened, will I capitulate? If you're removed from me, will I become unstable?" "Will you?" I asked. "Yes." The admission hung in the air like a blade. "Completely. I would burn this city if it meant getting you back." "Don't say that. Don't even think it." "I'm already thinking it. I've been thinking it since the moment I saw you in that restaurant." He stood up and walked to the window, creating physical distance that felt like it could stretch into infinity. "Do you understand what you've done to me? You've made me weak. You've made me incapable of the decisions this family needs me to make. Then leave, I said. Take me and leave. We could what? Run? There's nowhere far enough. Not from my grandfather. Not from Dante. Not from the Lucian family, who's already heard rumors that my grandfather's bloodline carries a liability named Alessandra. The venom in the way he said my name made me flinch. I'm sorry, I whispered. You apologize constantly for things that aren't your fault, for existing, for making me care about you. He turned to face me, and his eyes were haunted. Don't apologize. Just accept that you've ruined me, that you've made me into a man who would trade everything for safety that you don't even want. I understood then. This wasn't anger. This was fear. He was terrified, not of his grandfather, not of Dante, but of his own capacity to love me, of what that love made him willing to do. That night, after he'd finally slept, I got out of bed and moved to the window. The estate spread out below was beautiful and terrible and absolute. Men walked the grounds. Lights burned in windows across the way. It was a machine designed to keep people in and threats out. And I was both, depending on who you asked. I felt the baby move. A strong kick, almost painful, like he was trying to remind me that he was real. That there was life beyond this moment, this room, this impossible choice between two men and a world that wanted to consume all of us. I'm sorry, I whispered to the belly. I'm sorry I brought you into this. You didn't. I turned. Victor stood in the darkness, having apparently woken and found me here. His hair was disheveled from sleep, and his bare chest rose and fell with steadied breathing. This isn't your fault, he said. None of this. The baby isn't your fault. My grandfather isn't your fault. Dante isn't your fault. It feels like my fault. He came closer, not to touch, but to stand beside me, looking out at the same view. My grandfather asked me something yesterday, he said. In private. He asked me if I would kill Dante myself, or let him die to threats from outside forces. I didn't ask what Victor had said. The answer was written in the tightness of his jaw. I told him I'd do it myself, Victor continued, that I'd make sure it was slow enough to send a message, but quick enough to keep the business from being disrupted by extended violence. Did he believe you? No. He knows I was lying. He knows that if killing Dante would protect you, I wouldn't care about the business impact or the messages or any of it. The confession hung between us. I felt something shift inside me, something fundamental. The last barrier between fear and surrender cracking open. I want you to touch me, I said quietly. I want to stop being careful. I want to stop pretending that distance is the same thing as safety. I know it's not safe. I know it's dangerous. I know that every moment we're close, we're more vulnerable to scrutiny and threat and use. I turned to face him, and the moonlight caught the tears on my cheeks. But I don't care anymore. I can't care anymore. I'm tired of being a ghost in the same room with the person I love. He looked at me for a long moment. His hand reached up, tentative, and cupped my face. His thumb traced my cheekbone with surprising gentleness. If I touch you, he said, I'm admitting that I can't survive without you, that you're not a luxury, that you're essential, and that makes you a target. I'm already a target, I said. There's no escaping that. So let me choose this. Let me choose you. Let me choose to matter to you in a way that goes beyond strategy and survival. He lowered his forehead to mine, and I felt him tremble. I love you, he said. I've loved you since the moment I left you. I love you enough to destroy everything I've built. I love you enough to burn it all down. Then stop running from it, I whispered. Stop being afraid. Just love me. And for the first time since the night before everything fell apart, he held me like I wasn't going to disappear. The silence after that moment felt like the silence before a storm, charged, waiting, full of promise and threat in equal measure. Victor didn't leave my room anymore. We maintained the pretense of separate beds, but that was all it was, pretense. Most nights, once the house had settled into sleep, he would come to me, and we would hold each other in the darkness while his grandfather's surveillance systems tried to decide what they were witnessing. We didn't talk about what would happen, didn't make plans, didn't pretend there was a future beyond the walls. We just existed in the present tense, the only time where anything felt certain. But tension was building. I could feel it like pressure beneath the skin. Constantine's wife found me in the library one afternoon, pulling books that I had no intention of reading off shelves at random. "You're making him weak," she said without preamble. She was knitting something, a baby sweater, I realized with a shock. "You should understand that. You should use it." "Use what?" "His devotion." She set down her needles. "A smart woman would leverage that, would ask for guarantees, for safety, for concessions from his grandfather." "I'm not a smart woman," I said, "and even if I were, I wouldn't do that." "Why not? You're carrying a child that Constantine considers a liability. You're trapped in a house surrounded by people who would kill you if the wrong person gave the order. You have nothing but Victor's attachment to you. That's your only asset." "Love isn't an asset to be traded," I said. "If I use it, if I weaponize it, I destroy it." She studied me with something like respect. "You're either very foolish or very wise. I haven't decided which." The next day, everything changed. Dante was found in an abandoned warehouse, beaten beyond recognition, alive, but barely. The message was delivered by Constantine himself, in front of the assembled family. "The Moretti problem is resolved," the old man said. "But it cost us. It cost us resources and visibility and political capital with the families who were waiting to see how we'd respond." He looked directly at Victor. "The question," Constantine continued, "is whether we've resolved a threat to our security, or whether we've simply made a statement that will destroy anyone my grandson decides to protect, and that makes us reactive instead of strategic." "He threatened her," Victor said flatly. "And you killed him for it. That's admirable, in a personal sense. But personally admirable decisions are not always strategically sound. So what do you want me to do? Let him live? Continue using her as leverage? I want you to make decisions based on business, not emotion. I want you to prove that you're capable of cold calculation despite your feelings for the girl." Victor's hands clenched into fists. I watched him, sitting quietly in the corner of the conference room, where they'd placed me, as if I were an object being discussed, and I felt the rage building inside him. "I'm capable of whatever you need me to be," Victor said. "Are you?" Constantine leaned back in his chair. "Because I'm beginning to doubt that. I'm beginning to think that girl has made you useless." That night, Victor didn't come to my room. I lay in the darkness, listening for him, and he never came. The absence felt physical, like a piece of me had been removed while I slept. By morning, I understood what had happened. His grandfather was forcing a choice. Either Victor would maintain emotional distance, proving his dedication to the family, or he would continue his behavior, proving his unsuitability for the role he was expected to play. I found him in the study, standing at the window with a glass of whiskey that he wasn't drinking. "Don't," I said. He didn't turn around. "Don't what?" Don't do what your grandfather wants. Don't choose the family over me. It's not a choice I'm making willingly, he said. It's a choice I'm being forced to make, and I'm not strong enough to refuse. You are, I said. You're the strongest person I know. No. He finally turned to face me, and I could see the war happening inside him, raw and visible and devastating. I'm weak. I'm weak because you exist, and I can't stop wanting to protect you, and my grandfather sees that weakness and exploits it. Then what? You stop loving me? You pretend these weeks didn't happen? I don't know, he said, and the honest confusion in his voice broke something inside me. I don't know how to be both the man you need and the man my family needs. Then choose, I said. Choose one. Choose me. He took a step closer. His hand reached out, and for a moment I thought he would touch my face again. Instead, his fingers grazed the side of my neck, tracing my pulse with infinite sadness. If I choose you, I've already destroyed this family's position, he said. There are other families waiting for any sign of weakness, other organizations ready to move into our territory. Men under my grandfather's command who are waiting to see if I'm fit to eventually lead them. And if I'm not, then what? Then they choose someone else, someone harder, someone without a liability. The word hung in the air, and I felt it like a blade. So that's what I am, I said. A liability. You're everything, he said. That's why you're a liability. He moved away from me, creating distance. Physical distance that felt like it could stretch into infinity and never close again. Until the baby comes, he said. I need you to stay in your room. I need you to understand that we can't do this anymore. Not in this house, under my grandfather's watch, with so many people waiting for evidence that I'm compromised. Victor, please, he said, and the word was a breaking point. Please don't make this harder than it is. I left without another word, and he didn't follow. That night, alone in the darkness, the baby kicked hard enough to hurt. And I understood, finally, that love in this world didn't come with the luxury of being gentle. Love came with choices, and choices came with costs, and the only way to survive was to be willing to pay. 14 days of separation. 14 days of moving through the estate like ghosts in different timelines. Victor was colder during these days, sharper. The Mafia boss instead of the man who trembled when he touched my belly. He attended meetings with his grandfather, made decisions about business that I wasn't allowed to know about, spoke to other families on the phone with a tone that could have cut glass. It was the performance of strength. It was also the fastest way to destroy what little we'd managed to build. I understood what he was doing. I understood it was necessary, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. On the 15th day, there was a party. Constantine was hosting some of the lesser families, political gestures, business courtesies, the kind of gathering that required showing stability and strength. I was told to stay in my room. I was also told to wear the dress that had been left on my bed. Emerald silk again. The same color I'd worn to the restaurant where everything began. It wasn't a coincidence. I heard the guests arriving around 8 o'clock. Men's voices, the clink of glasses, the soundtrack of power being negotiated in real time. I sat on my bed, hands folded over my belly, and tried not to hope. Hope was dangerous. The door to my room opened without knocking. Victor stood in the doorway, dressed in a suit that looked like it had been tailored to the exact dimensions of his body. His hair was pulled back. His expression was glacial. He looked like a man who could make people disappear without feeling a thing. Come, he said. Not a request. Why? Because my grandfather has decided that you should be visible, that you should be seen as part of the family, not as a hidden liability. He didn't meet my eyes. It's strategy. I stood slowly, using the bedpost to steady myself. The dress fit perfectly. Someone had taken my measurements, had known exactly what would make me look beautiful and vulnerable, and claimed all at once. What are people going to think? I asked. They're going to think that I've decided to legitimize you. They're going to think that whatever you are to me, I've chosen to make you official. The words sounded like they were coming from a very far-away place. He led me downstairs to the main hall, where Constantine's guests were gathered. 50 men, maybe more. All of them armed beneath their expensive suits, all of them calculating. The room went quiet when we entered. Victor's hand was at the small of my back, and everyone in that room understood exactly what that meant. Ownership, claim, warning. Constantine rose from his chair, a smile crossing his stone-cut face. "Gentlemen," he said, "my grandson's guest. She carries his child. This makes her valuable to us. Harm her, and you've harmed him. Harm him, and you've harmed the family." It was a threat delivered as an introduction. Dinner was agony. I was seated at Victor's left, and the men around the table spoke to me like I was a decorative object that had just learned to respond to stimuli. They asked about the pregnancy, they speculated about the baby's gender, they made jokes about Victor becoming a father that made him tense in ways I could feel even without him touching me. When it was over, he walked me back to my room without speaking. At the threshold, he paused. "Tomorrow," he said, "Dante's successor is arriving. My grandfather wants to negotiate a peace. Is that possible?" "No, but we'll pretend for a few hours and see if anyone bleeds." He turned to leave, and something broke inside me. "Don't go," I said. He stopped, his back to me. "What?" "Don't leave. Stay. Just for tonight. Stay with me. Not as strategy, not as performance. Just stay." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he turned around. "If I stay, Alessandra, I won't be able to leave again." "Then don't," I whispered. He crossed the distance between us, and the moment the door closed behind him, the careful control he'd maintained for 2 weeks fractured completely. "I can't do this," he said. "I can't keep pretending that distance is protecting you. I can't pretend that staying away from you is making anyone safer." "Then don't," I repeated. He reached out, and this time his hand didn't hesitate. It cupped my face with all the tenderness of someone handling something infinitely precious. "I love you," he said. "I've never stopped loving you. I never will stop loving you." "I know. That's why I'm going to burn everything. Not today, not next month, but eventually. I'm going to take you far away from this, and I'm going to destroy anyone who tries to follow." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe we'll find another way." "There is no other way," he said. "Not in this world." He kissed me then, and the kiss held all the desperation of the weeks we'd spent not touching. It held the promise of surrender, not my surrender to him, but his surrender to what we were. He pulled back just enough to breathe, and in the darkness, his eyes were bright with tears. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because if you say yes, I'm not going to be able to treat this as casual. I'm not going to be able to protect myself from you anymore." My hand moved to his chest, and I could feel his heartbeat thundering beneath my palm. "I've never been more sure of anything." He lifted me gently, so careful of the baby. always so careful, and carried me to the bed. He laid me down like I was made of glass, and then he was beside me, his hands shaking as they traced the shape of my body over the silk dress. "Tell me if I hurt you," he whispered. "You couldn't." He kissed my neck, my shoulder, the curve where my collarbone met my throat. His hands found the zipper of the dress, and he dragged it down with aching slowness. I realized, in that moment, that I'd been wrong about myself. I wasn't innocent. Innocence was a state of being that had nothing to do with experience and everything to do with the capacity to be hurt. I'd been innocent before I met Victor, and now I was something else entirely, something raw and open and terrified. His mouth moved across my collarbone. I made a sound that I didn't recognize, a whimper, a plea, something that sounded like drowning. "Shh," he whispered against my skin. "I've got you. I've always had you." My hands moved to his back, pulling him closer. The dress fell away. He was kissing my sternum now, the swell of my breast, and I felt shame flicker through me. Shame at the way my body had changed, at the stretch marks and the weight I'd gained. "You're beautiful," he said, like he could read my thoughts. "You're so fucking beautiful." The curse word should have shocked me. Instead, it felt like a prayer. His hand moved between my legs, and for a moment I wanted to pull away. The instinct to protect myself, to preserve what remained of innocence, warring against the need to let him in completely. "Let me," he said. "Please, just let me." I did. I stopped fighting whatever natural instinct wanted to keep me separate, and I surrendered to the sensation of his touch, gentle, reverent, patient. He took his time, learning the landscape of my body with his mouth and his hands, mapping every place that made me gasp or tremble. When he entered me, it was slow. So slow. He was breathing against my neck, holding himself back with visible effort, waiting for me to adjust. "Okay?" he asked. I couldn't answer. I could only move beneath him, trying to communicate in the language that existed beneath words. He moved with infinite care, like he was afraid that any sudden motion would shatter me. His forehead rested against mine, and his eyes stayed open, locked on mine, refusing to break connection for even a moment. There was no athleticism in it, no performance, just two people trying to exist inside the same body, if only for a moment. When it ended, it wasn't explosive. It was implosive, a gathering of all the tension and separation and desperate love, and then a slow dissolution into something closer to peace than I'd felt in months. He held me afterward, his arm across my belly, his face buried in my hair. We didn't speak. The silence felt sacred. Outside the window, the city burned with November lights. Inside the room, we existed in a bubble that felt like it could last forever, even though we both knew it was already collapsing. "I'm yours," I whispered, not to him, but to the darkness. "I'm completely yours." He didn't respond with words. He just held me tighter, and I felt him begin to cry, silent tears that dampened my hair, the sound of a man giving up the last of his defenses. In the morning, everything would be different. But for that night, we were safe. We were whole. We were loved. It was enough. The attack came before dawn, not from the outside, from within. I learned this later, pieced together from fragments of conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Constantine's own man, someone he'd trusted for 40 years, had made a deal with the Lukian family. They'd offered him enough money to purchase another life, and he'd decided to cash in. The explosives were set in the wine cellar. The plan was to detonate them during the meeting with Dante's successor, eliminating not just Constantine, but half of the family's leadership in one blow. Victor woke me with his hand over my mouth. "Get dressed," he said. "Now. Don't ask questions." I obeyed, my hands shaking as I pulled on clothes. Outside the door, I could hear the sound of gunfire, screaming, the kind of chaos that comes before actual violence, when people realize that everything they thought was stable has fractured. He pulled me down the hallway toward a staircase I'd never noticed before. Hidden. Intentional. "What's happening?" I asked. "My grandfather is being murdered," Victor said flatly. "By someone he trusted. It doesn't matter. What matters is getting you out." "I'm not leaving without you." "You're not leaving at all," he said. "You're going to the panic room. You're going to stay there until I come back for you." "And if you don't?" He didn't answer. He just pulled me into a room hidden behind a bookshelf, revealed a door that looked like it was part of the wall, and pushed me inside. "Lock this," he said. "Don't open it for anyone but me. Understood?" I tried to grab his hand, but he was already moving. The door was closing. "Victor, I love you," he said. "I love our child. That's why I'm going back out there. That's why I'm going to burn it all down and rebuild it, and I'm going to do it for you." The door closed. The lock clicked. I was alone in a room that was maybe 12 by 12, with supplies and water and a radio that I was afraid to use. I could hear the violence through the walls, muffled but visceral. Explosions, screams, the sound of a regime dying and something new being born from the ashes. Time became meaningless. I don't know if it was hours or days that I spent in that room, listening to the sound of Victor's world tearing itself apart. The baby kicked constantly. I talked to him, or her. I was beginning to suspect it might be a daughter, despite the predictions, explaining that his father was out there fighting, that he was doing this for us, that everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it. When the door finally opened, I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. He was covered in blood. His shirt was torn. There was a gash across his ribs, another along his left arm. His eyes were the wrong color, dark in a way that had nothing to do with pigment, and everything to do with having witnessed things that changed a person at their fundamental core. "Victor," I said, and his name was a question. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, and then his control fractured. He fell to his knees, and I moved to him, pulling him against my body, even though he was the bigger one, the stronger one, the one who was supposed to protect me. "I had to do it," he said, his words muffled against my belly. "I had to kill him myself, to prove that I was still in control, that I hadn't been compromised by you." "Who? Who did you kill?" "Everyone," he said. "My grandfather, the man who betrayed him, half of the captains who'd sworn to him. I had to prove that I was capable of making the hard choices." I held him, and in my arms, he felt like he was coming apart. "I killed them," he repeated, "so that they wouldn't kill you, so that there would never be any doubt about whose bloodline matters more." "That's not... You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. That's what you don't understand. That's what living in this world means. You have to be willing to destroy everything beautiful to protect the one beautiful thing you can't bear to lose." His hand moved to my belly, and he pressed his forehead against the baby, and I felt something shift in the universe. This was love in the Mafia, not romance, not gentleness. Just the willingness to become a monster if it meant keeping the person you loved safe. "Come with me," he said. "Get up, we have to move." "Where?" "To the surface, to let you see what I've done." He helped me up, even though he could barely stand himself, and he led me out of the panic room and into the hallway. The estate was chaos, bodies everywhere, servants who'd been caught in the crossfire, soldiers who'd been loyal to the old regime. And in the center of it all, in the main hall where we'd had dinner the night before the attack, Constantine sat slumped in a chair, his sightless eyes staring at something beyond this world. I turned away and vomited into a decorative pot. Victor didn't try to comfort me. He just stood there, his hand on my lower back, accepting the accusation in my silence. "I'm the head of the family now," he said flatly. "This is my territory. These are my people, my violence, my choices, my blood." "And me?" I asked, wiping my mouth with a shaking hand. "What am I?" "You're the reason I'm still human enough to be able to ask that question." He pulled me against him, and I didn't have the strength to push away. Over the next hours, I learned that Constantine had been planning for contingencies. Other safe houses, other territories, other resources. Victor spent the day making phone calls and giving orders, slowly consolidating power, transforming the family business from a dying regime into something new and hungry. By evening, he came to me with a gun. "We're leaving the city," he said. "Tomorrow morning. I've arranged transportation, somewhere south, somewhere warm, somewhere very far from here." "Where? Does it matter?" I looked at him, at the blood he couldn't seem to wash off, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the way his hands still shook when he wasn't holding something. "You're not coming with us," I said. It wasn't a question. "Not immediately. I have business here. I have to ensure the transition is absolute. I have to make sure no one questions my authority." "How long?" "A month, maybe 2. The thought of carrying a child, giving birth, learning to be a mother while he was dealing with the aftermath of a violent coup felt impossible. But I was learning that impossible things happened when you loved someone enough to accept them. "I'll wait," I said, "for however long it takes." He kissed me then, and the kiss tasted like ash and blood and the strange perfume of new power. "You'll be safe," he promised. "I'll make sure of that. Nothing will ever touch you again. I'll kill anyone who tries." I believed him. That was the terrifying part. I believed him completely. The safe house was in the Bahamas, a private island that Victor owned through so many shell corporations that even his own lawyers weren't entirely sure who technically held the deed. White sand, turquoise water. The kind of place designed to look like paradise, while being, in reality, a very beautiful prison. I gave birth to a daughter on a night when a hurricane was raging outside. Her name was Marina, the only name Victor had insisted on before he left. A name that meant "of the sea." When I held her for the first time, my hands shaking, and my body devastated in ways I hadn't anticipated, I understood what it meant to love something more than I loved breathing. She had his eyes. Even in the newborn darkness, I could see the ice blue that would someday intimidate men and destroy their empires. Victor came to meet her when she was 2 months old. He arrived like he always did, quietly, with a private plane and security that was so effective I didn't even realize he was there until I saw him standing in the doorway of the nursery. "Hello, Marina," he said softly, and his entire face changed. He picked her up with both hands, like she was made of spun glass, and he cried. Not the controlled tears of a man managing his emotions, but the raw sobs of someone who'd been given something he didn't know he deserved. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's perfect." "She's strong," I said. "She cries like she's threatening people." He laughed, a real laugh, the first one I'd heard since the night of the attack. "She's a Kozlov. She should threaten people." That night, after Marina was asleep, we lay together on the porch of the house, watching the water change colors with the sunset. I can stay for a week, he said. After that, I have to return. There are still people consolidating power under the guise of loyalty, waiting to see if I'll prove to be weak or strong. Are you weak? With you? He reached over and took my hand. Yes, completely. You make me want to abandon all of this. You make me want to be someone else entirely. Then do it, I said. Abandon it. Be someone else. I can't, he said, and the sadness in those 3 words was comprehensive. Because if I do, someone worse will fill the vacuum, someone without your influence, without your humanity, and they'll come for you. They'll come for Marina, and I won't be strong enough to stop them. So we're trapped, I said. We're safe, he corrected. That's not the same thing as trapped. Safety is the luxury I can give you now. It's the only luxury that matters. He showed me his phone while we talked. News from the city, expansion of territory, new business arrangements with families that had previously aligned with other powers. Photos of Rita, his new second-in-command, standing beside him in the traditional colors of the Kozlov family. Is she more than that? I asked, and hated myself for asking. She's useful, he said. And loyal. And she doesn't threaten the power structure by distracting me with emotional complexity. But no, she's not more than that. She'll never be more than that. I'm sorry that I'm a distraction, I said. He rolled over, propping himself on one elbow, and looked down at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Don't apologize for being the thing that makes me human, he said. Don't apologize for being the reason I can look at myself in the mirror and remember that I'm not just a predator. Are you sure about that? About being human? No, he said honestly, but I'm willing to keep trying for you. He stayed for the week. He helped me with Marina, learning to hold her bottle properly, understanding how to swaddle her against the cool island night. He told me stories about his childhood that he'd never shared before, his grandfather's violence, his grandmother's cruelty, the systems that had been designed to make him into something unfeeling and tactical. I was supposed to become him, Victor said one afternoon, watching Marina sleep. I was supposed to learn that love was a liability, that connection was weakness. But then I met you, and everything changed. Do you regret it? I asked. Loving me? It's caused you nothing but complications. Every day, he said. And when I pulled back, shocked, he caught my hand. Every single day, I regret the ways that loving you has complicated my life and endangered your safety, but I wouldn't change it. Not for all the power in the world. On his last day, he brought me a document. Legal paperwork that transferred a significant portion of his legitimate business holdings to my name. If something happens to me, he said, you and Marina will be secure. You'll have enough resources to disappear, to rebuild, to live a life that has nothing to do with this world. I don't want that, I said. I want you. You have me, he said. You'll always have me. But I also want you to have options. I want you to know that you could leave if the weight of loving me becomes too much. It's too much, I said. But I'm staying anyway. He pulled me close, and in his embrace, I felt the weight of choice. The understanding that I'd made a decision, and that decision would ripple through the rest of my life, defining me, consuming me, saving me. I love you, I said, for exactly who you are, for what you've had to become, for the man you're trying to be because I exist. I love you, Victor Kozlov, not despite the darkness, but because you're willing to stand in it so that I can stand in the light. He didn't respond with words. He just held me tighter, and in his silence, I felt the answer. 3 years passed on the island. 3 years of building a life in the spaces between worlds. Marina grew into a toddler with her father's ice blue eyes and my tendency toward quiet observation. She would stand at the edge of the water and watch the waves with an intensity that seemed far too old for her small body. Victor called her his serious girl. I called her precocious. In truth, she was just learning the world from a position of being loved fiercely and completely. Victor came every month, never staying longer than a week, always leaving with the weight of the world pressing against him again. During these visits, he was completely hers and mine. During his absences, I existed in a strange kind of waiting. The island was beautiful and isolating. I had staff who served quietly, asking no questions. I had access to education materials that I used to teach Marina, already showing signs of brilliant complexity at age 4. I had everything except freedom. Until the phone call came. It was Rita, Victor's second-in-command. Her voice was efficient and cold and deeply, fundamentally sorry. "He's been shot," she said. "The rivals from the Lukian family. They've been escalating their movements, testing boundaries. Victor went to a meeting meant to broker peace, and they—" She paused. I could hear her breathing, could feel the weight of what she was about to say. "He's alive, but he's in bad condition. He's asking for you." I made arrangements within the hour. Private plane, security. The understanding that returning to the city meant returning to the world of violence and threat that I'd managed to keep at arm's length for 3 years. He was in a private hospital, technically a clinic, technically not licensed by any official body, the kind of place where the medical establishment looked the other way, and powerful men recovered without anyone important knowing they'd been shot. Victor was unconscious when I arrived. A bullet had punctured his right lung. Another had grazed his spine. The doctors said he was lucky. In the underworld, luck was just another word for violence that didn't kill you. I sat beside his bed and held his hand and tried to make myself believe that he would wake up. He did, on the 3rd day, gasping like he was surfacing from water. "Alessandra?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." "Don't move. Don't talk." "I thought—" He coughed, blood staining the corner of his mouth. "I thought you might not come." "Of course I came," I said, and felt tears spill down my cheeks. "I always come. I will always come." "The city is chaos," he said. "With me gone, even for a few days, they're moving, testing. They want to know if I'm still capable of leading, if I'm too weak, too distracted, too human. Then we'll deal with it together," I said, even though I knew it was impossible. Even though I knew that my presence was exactly the kind of liability that would make him weaker, not stronger. "I need you to take Marina," he said. "I need you to take her and disappear. There's a place in Prague, money, identities. Everything you need to start over without the name Kozlov attached to you. I'm not leaving you." "You have to." He squeezed my hand with whatever strength remained. "Because I'm not going to survive this. And when I'm gone, you and Marina will become targets, not assets, not leverage, just evidence." "Don't say that," I said. "Don't give up." "I'm not giving up," he said. "I'm being rational. I'm being tactical. I'm doing the one thing that a mafia boss is supposed to be able to do, making the hard choice to protect the person he loves." He lived for another 3 weeks. 3 weeks of slowly deteriorating health, infections that the doctors fought and lost, the gradual understanding that even Viktor Kozlov was subject to the laws of biology and consequence. During those 3 weeks, he told me stories about his grandfather, about the man he'd killed to take over the family, about the violence that had become such a part of his daily existence that he sometimes forgot what it felt like not to be at war. And he told me that he'd changed his will, that everything, the businesses, the properties, the money, the territories, would be transferred to a trust with Rita as executor. Rita, who would protect Marina, because protecting Marina meant keeping the Kozlov name alive, because every crime lord who'd ever wanted to establish dominance would want to claim he'd eliminated Viktor Kozlov's daughter. Unless, Viktor said, you take her and run, unless you give her a chance to be someone other than my heir. I won't let her go, I said. I know, he said. That's why you have to. That's why you have to love me enough to leave me. On the last morning, he was alert for only a few minutes. The pain medication had mostly shut down his cognitive functions, but for those brief moments, he was present. I love you, he said. I know I've hurt you. I know I've brought violence into your life. I know I've compromised every peaceful thing you might have wanted. But I would do it all again, because the alternative is a world where I never knew you existed. What am I supposed to do without you? I asked. Live, he said. Be free. Be beautiful. Be alive in ways that I was never able to be. He died at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, his hand in mine, with the sound of the city burning faintly in the distance. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. Crying was a luxury for people whose hearts were still intact. And mine had been so thoroughly shattered that I wasn't sure how the pieces still managed to form something that could beat. Rita came to find me afterward. She was different without Viktor to orbit around. Less controlled, more herself. She brought me the documents he'd prepared, the identities, the instructions. I know what he wanted, she said. For you to run. For you to take Marina and disappear. I'm staying, I said. Marina is staying. This is her inheritance, whether she likes it or not. That's not safe. No, I agreed. But it's right. Viktor built this empire. He killed for it. He died for it. I'm not going to let his legacy be erased because it's convenient or safe. Rita studied me for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Then we'll do this together, she said, until Marina is old enough to decide for herself, until she chooses whether to step into this world or away from it. We buried him in the family cemetery, in the old part of the city where the first Kozlovs had made their mark on the world. Hundreds of people attended, rivals, allies, men who'd feared him, and men who'd followed him, and men who'd simply wanted to ensure he was actually dead. At the graveside, I held Marina's hand, and she watched the proceedings with her father's eyes, understanding instinctively that something massive and terrible and essential had just ended. Will Daddy come back? She asked, in that small voice that broke my heart. No, I said, but he's with us. In you, in me, in everything he built. He's part of us forever. She seemed to accept this. Children were resilient in ways that adults could never be. Over the next year, Rita and I restructured the family's operations. We diversified the money. We reached out to families that Viktor had been at war with and brokered peace treaties. We did everything we could to make the Kozlov name synonymous with stability rather than bloodlust. It didn't erase the violence of Viktor's reign. It didn't make what he'd done okay. But it meant that he'd left something behind other than death. On the anniversary of his death, Marina asked to go to his grave. We brought flowers, emerald ones, for the dress I wore the night he saw me with Dante, for the color that had always meant destiny in our world. I want to be like him when I grow up, Marina said, standing before the gravestone. Like him how? I asked. Strong, but kind, powerful, but not mean to people who don't deserve it. That's a very good goal, I said. I think he would have wanted that for you. She placed the flowers on the grave with careful ceremony, then looked up at me. Do you miss him? She asked. Every day, I said. But I don't regret loving him, not for 1 second. Good, she said. Because I want to understand why you chose him, so that when I choose wisely. I pulled her close, and I felt the weight of the future settling around us. Marina would grow up in this world. She would understand violence and power, and the kind of love that costs everything. She would choose to be a part of this empire, or she would choose to escape it. But she would choose with full knowledge of what both paths meant. Victor had wanted to protect me from this. But in the end, protection was an illusion, and the only real thing was the choice itself. I'd chosen him. I'd chosen darkness over safety, complexity over simplicity, love over freedom. And even knowing how it ended, with him in the ground and me standing over his grave, I would choose the same way again. Because some things were worth the cost. Some things were worth everything. The Kozlov Empire continued. Through Rita's pragmatism and Marina's growing intelligence, it evolved. It became less about violence and more about dominance through power. It became less about destruction and more about control. But in my private moments, I wondered if Victor was watching from whatever came after. If he saw the daughter he'd never had the chance to know, growing into her power. If he understood that by dying, by giving everything to me and Marina, he'd accomplished what all his violence never could. He'd created something that would outlive him. They say that love conquers all. They don't mention that sometimes the conquest costs everything. That sometimes surrender is the only victory available. But I'd learned that lesson well, standing in a restaurant 3 years ago, seeing the man I loved frozen at the sight of the child he didn't know existed. Everything that followed came from that single moment, everything beautiful and terrible and worth living for.